The Supreme Court's decision, which restricts migrants from seeking asylum in the U.S., has sparked major outrage on Capitol Hill and across the country. The court ruled in favor of the Trump administration by allowing the U.S. to deny and deport most Central Americans seeking asylum in the U.S. This ruling is only temporary while the legal fight plays out in the lower courts.
President Trump claims migrants have abused the country's asylum system, but critics say his policy hurts refugees fleeing poverty and war. CBS News reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez has been following the story very closely for us, and he's joining us now from Washington. So let us start with, how exactly does this ruling change the asylum policies here in the U.S.? What are the biggest changes that immigrants are going to be facing now?
Right. Good morning, Vlad and Anne-Marie. So this rule that the Supreme Court is allowing the administration to enforce really represents a major overhaul to the American asylum system that the administration is trying to implement without Congress. It effectively renders most migrants who travel through a third country like Mexico and reach the U.S., but did not seek protection in Mexico or another third country, ineligible for asylum in the U.S. For example, someone who traveled from Honduras through Guatemala and Mexico to reach the U.S.-Mexico border will be ineligible for asylum, barring few exceptions, because U.S. officials will ask that person or that family why they did not seek asylum in a country like Guatemala or in a country like Mexico. It also affects people from Cuba, right? People from Cuba who fly to countries like Honduras and travel through that country, Guatemala and Mexico, to reach the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. officials would ask those people from Cuba why they did not seek asylum in the third country that they traveled through. So that would be Honduras. So it really represents a seismic shift in the way that the asylum policy in the U.S. has been carried out in recent years. And it targets, which is very important to know, not only people from the Central American countries of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, which we've heard of a lot, but also people from Venezuela, Brazil, and even people from Africa, right, who have journeyed to the U.S.-Mexico border in larger numbers this year.
So the justification, as you point out, Camilo, is that these asylum seekers should seek asylum in the first country before they apply in the United States, which on paper makes logical sense. But given that many of those countries that they're transiting through also have problems and issues with high crime, with drugs, with lack of economic opportunity,
right,
it sort of rings a little bit hollow. On the other hand, the president claims that many migrants seeking the asylum abuse the policy. Where's the evidence for that?
Right, that has been a constant theme of this administration, right? That most of the people who try to seek asylum here are economic migrants, as they call them, and they believe that this rule, the administration believes that this rule will try to curtail what they refer to as forum shopping by migrants. They believe asylum seekers, instead of seeking protection in countries like Guatemala or Mexico, prefer to seek asylum in the U.S. because they would have better economic opportunities here. But of course, as you mentioned, Vlad, immigrant advocates will take issue with this because, as you know, countries like Guatemala and Mexico do not have as robust of an asylum system as the U.S., and many parts of those countries are also plagued by rampant poverty, widespread crime, and there's really not the same level of protection for refugees and asylum seekers as there is here in the U.S.
So you mentioned advocates for migrants. What are organizations like the ACLU doing?
Right, so the ACLU is mounting one of the two big challenges to this policy. An attorney told me yesterday that this is not the last say in this matter, that they hope that eventually their argument will prevail in court, but they still conceded that this is a pretty devastating blow to them. Why? Because the next hearing before the Ninth Circuit is on December 2nd of this year. So the administration hypothetically can continue to implement this very controversial policy for months until a court may file another injunction. But, like I said, this could take months. So it's going to be an issue for the coming weeks.
Camilo, thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.